Hey everybody, it's Lady Ambrosia. I hope all of you are doing well. I'm really excited tonight because I have a special guest. I have Zabora from Kemetic Witchcraft, and we are going to be talking about being a Kemetic witch and working with the Egyptian Pantheon. So why don't you go ahead and introduce yourself and tell us about you.
All right, well, Nini, everyone, I'm Zabora. I have my own channel. It's Kemetic Witchcraft, and I'm also very active in the pagan community on G+, so you can go stalk me there. I also have my own Facebook page, and that's Zabora Maloney. You can stalk me there as well. I do not currently accept clients or anything, so please don't contact me for work. I'm not taking clients at this time.
That's good that you point that out. Yes. All right, so I have some questions, so that way we can kind of better understand, you know, your path and your tradition. So I guess to start off with, I think, how would you define Kemetic witchcraft and Kemeticism? You know, how do we define that there?
Well, the word Kemeticism was coined in the 1970s by an Afrocentric group who believe, you know, like Egypt was full of black people and black people were kings and they needed to reclaim that. But they didn't so much practice the Egyptian way of life. And today, Kemeticism has evolved to include the Egyptian way of life. So that's Egyptian rituals like priests would have done. This is offerings that everybody would have done. So Kemeticism itself is honoring the Egyptian pantheon in a way that the Egyptians may have honored them.
So you could kind of say that this is like a Reconstructionist path.
Yeah, it is almost, it is very Reconstructionist, but the path that I follow, I am a member of Kemetic Reform, and it's kind of a modernized version. So, like, I have polycystic ovary syndrome. I bleed very heavily for a very long time. And in some traditions, I would not be able to approach the gods because I'm bleeding, I'm imperfect. Or if you have a cut or something like that, you can't approach the gods. So our religion kind of goes, well, that's silly. You know, I've had personal UPGs about what I should do about that, and that's good enough for my group. So I'm very happy with that. So we modernize it just a little bit. We're not so heavy with the rituals, although we are very ritualized.
Okay. Yeah. So what do you feel like really called you to start walking this path and honoring these gods?
Well, as a child, actually, I became with the Egyptian religion, and oh my God, the animal-headed gods, I have to know about these people. There's gold everywhere, the giant pyramids, you know, who could not be fascinated? So as a kid, I really got into it. As I got older, I discovered witchcraft. And if I would have known there, I could have been an Egyptian witch. Oh, I would have been an Egyptian witch. That would have been it. But I thought Wicca was my only option. So I went with Wicca for a while. I became very dissatisfied with the tradition. You know, I was like, this is just not for me. I'm not connecting with any sort of deity named goddess. It's not me. So I went and I discovered a few people, and they're like, you know, you should look into hoodoo. Hey, you should check out hoodoo. So while I was actually with a friend teaching them European witchcraft that I knew, she became infatuated with Isis. So it was through my friendship with her that the Egyptians were reintroduced. And I had bought a book for her. I think it was Circle of Isis by Ellen Cannon Reed or Ellen Duncan Reed or something like that. I bought that book. I read it. I was like, you know, I like that. I like the Egyptian gods. She likes the Egyptian gods. Maybe this is something to kind of look into. So one night we're doing ritual, and it's a Sabbath, and we're making protection bracelets. And when I empower mine, I saw this giant wall of fire just explode in front of me. And I heard this lion just roar, and I knew just right then and there, Sekhmet got me. I knew I was hers, and I had to pursue her. It was really kind of cool. At the end of the ritual, my friend, my student, she was like, hey, Isis wrapped her wings around me. I felt that. I was like, you know what? Sekhmet yelled at me, so I felt that. So we kind of started looking more and more into that. And she chose to go the Wicca route, whereas I chose to go the Kemetic route and learn more about the people and the customs and the traditions. Excuse me. And she chose the Wiccan equivalent.
Yes, and correct me if I'm wrong, but I'm pretty sure I remember, and you guys will have to check this out if you still have it posted, but I remember a while back, I don't remember how long ago, but I remember, I think at some point watching a video where you talk about this experience, and it moved you so much to the point where it literally brought you to tears. And I remember watching that, and I could feel that, like on the other side of the screen, I could feel that. Like that was very powerful. It almost brought me to tears watching it. Is that still up there? Because if so, then you guys really need to go check it out, because it's a cool video.
It's one of my earlier videos. It is still up there. I don't think I've deleted but one video. And that was just because I was like, you know, I don't want to run this one. But all of my videos are still up, and that one is in there. It's just one of my earlier ones. So go back a little bit.
Called exactly? Because maybe I could even link it.
Shit. Like
if not, no big deal. I can try to find it later and link it too.
Yeah, I think it's like My Pagan Path or something like that, or I really don't remember. I'd have to look again.
But yeah, it is one of your earlier videos, I think.
Yeah.
So what do you feel like, okay, so if someone is like really interested in this and they would like to look for more information, do you have like any resources such as like books or blogs or vlogs or even TV shows or movies that you feel like do a substantial job at information out there?
Sure, of course. I actually have pulled off a few books, and I'll just go ahead and flash them up and explain a little bit about them. I would like to first talk about this one here, Following the Sun. And it's by Sharon Laborde, and she is the leader of Kemetic Reform. I found her book during this time when I went down this path looking for Sekhmet. I found her channel, Kemetic Independent, and I found her book through that. I ordered her book. The second one that she made, let's see if I have it. I have it, I just don't know where the heck I put it. The second one she made was Circle of the Sun, and that deals more with rituals. And then the third book here that she did was the 42 Declarations of Independence book. It's a little small pamphlet one, but I would definitely recommend those three first. And I would definitely say get them together, because it's almost like a series book. You know, like this information could have been plugged in anywhere in the first two books. So she just made a little separate book at the end. But Following the Sun and Circle of the Sun, definitely you want to start there. For online sources, if you don't want to start getting into the books, I would say you can check us out on Facebook, Kemetic Reform on Facebook. There's Kemetic Roundtable, which is a whole bunch of independent Kemetics come together and talk about a certain subject once a month or so. There's all kinds of videos that you can find even in the Black community of YouTube that deal with Egyptian iconography and stuff like that. And of course, you have your classic documentaries. Just Google any kind of Egypt documentary on YouTube, and you're going to find information. For those of you looking for plant knowledge for ancient Egypt, The Ancient Egyptian Herbal by Lisa Manichetti, however you say her name. Her, that'd be a good one. And then for those of you looking for understanding hieroglyphics, this is the book I would recommend, Egyptian Hieroglyphics for Complete Beginners by Bill Manley. And the last one for you advanced students would be Eternal Egypt by Richard J. Reedy. And this has got quite a few different rituals and spells and stuff in it. Your resources to get you started if you're looking for a Kemetic approach. If you're looking more for the Tamarind Wicca approach, that would be Ellen Cannon Reed, Circle of Isis. And then I think there was even another book called Egyptian Paganism. That is, I believe, the start of Tamarind Wicca. And Tamarind Wicca draws its name from Tamari, which was beloved land. So it's an Egyptian word for beloved land. Whereas we Kemetics use the word Kemet, black land. So, you know, you gotta delve into the history to understand the Egyptians no matter where you go. But the Tamarind Wicca is a little bit less tedious when it comes to ritual setups and stuff because you're already established in the Wicca tradition.
Okay. And what do you feel like within this path and within this tradition? Like, is there anything really that jumps out in particular that is maybe revered more than other things, or any like specific values or virtues that are kind of dogma or kind of way to live your life by? Any teachings like that? Or
yeah, of course. I mentioned the 42 Declarations of Independence. This is part of a spell in what most people know as the Book of the Dead. And it's what we call the Book of Going Forth by Day, or the Papyrus of Ani. This spell was judgment that was performed by these 42 gods. And it's things like, O chief of nobles who comes forth from Imu, terrorize anyone. So a lot of Kemetics say, well, if we're going to be judged on these 42 virtues, why not stick to those virtues and try not to terrorize anyone, to steal from anyone, or try not to take offerings from the gods. You know, these are very serious offenses. Then you also have the concept of Ma'at, little m, and that stands for truth, justice, and the Egyptian way of life. She is personified as Ma'at, big M, as a goddess deity who represents all these things. She's the purveyor of justice. She lays out the law of the land, and her enforcer is my goddess, Sekhmet, and a few other Eye of Ra goddesses. But the concept of Ma'at is basically, you know, be good, do good, don't lie, don't steal, the typical lay of the land. Egyptians also would accept the laws of their king. Now, we today don't have kings, but we do still have laws. Don't speed in a school zone, don't commit murder, don't burglarize anyone, don't shoot anybody, you know, don't stab anyone. So these laws are followed by modern Kemetic, see it as the land.
sorry, I think we got disconnected there for half a second.
Okay.
No, yeah, all that, I caught all that, like I could hear everything, but you just completely froze.
Oh, okay. And I was just like, why is she staring at me?
I was just listening, you know, I was listening and I was like, okay, this is super crazy because I can hear her, but she's frozen. So I was like listening to you and trying to watch the screen to see if it would like change back. I was like, oh no, more technical difficulties.
Yeah, of course, of course.
So let me ask you this too, because I think this is important. How do you feel, like what would you say would separate Kemetic witchcraft from, just witchcraft?
Well, that's very hard to define because Egyptian witchcraft itself is very fragmentary. One of the things that they did hold sacred is writing, but they would also hold stories very sacred and the written language sacred. So if you're a new mom and your firstborn son has a fever because he was just bitten by a scorpion or stung by a scorpion, you would go to the local temple and tell the priest what happened, pay him some bread and beer, and he would tell you the story of Horus the child being stung by a scorpion and his mother Iset curing him of the poison. And as he tells you this story, he's also writing it down, taking water from the Nile and pouring it over the statue of Horus the child who's covered in these bites and stings all over his body. He would then take the papyrus, dissolve it in water, and give it to you for you to give to your son. And if your son got better, oh, praise the gods, Horus was listening, Isis cheered your son, bam, that's Egyptian magic. But it's also, if you're a maiden and you're promised to be married to this young man, or you have been married for a year, you would take a statue of Amun or some other fertility god for fertility. So it's a lot of subtle ritualized action. If you wanted to conquer your enemy, you would write their name down and step on them. King Tut's very famous for having sandals and had a Libyan and a Nubian who were his enemies painted on them. So when he walked on them, he was destroying them. So it's not any one thing. It's like a flavor of magic.
Okay. So you would say it could be safe to say then that in the Egyptian Kemetic path, there's a lot of idolatry, maybe?
Yeah, I could say that. There's a lot of story. It's a lot of chanting and movement and music, and it's very living. It's not just one certain thing that can say, oh, that specifically is Egyptian, because of how old it is. So all we can do is hope to fragment it together, find a lot of open areas in the Egyptian magical system of Heka that I have interjected hoodoo. I identify with hoodoo, I love hoodoo, and I find that it fits very nicely in the Egyptian setup that I follow.
So would you consider yourself more of a hoodoo practitioner or a witch, or do you kind of consider yourself both?
I've always identified as a witch, and I've never really been comfortable with the title of priest. For me, that's a very special position reserved for different people than I.
Okay.
I definitely hold a lot of knowledge, but I use it to fuel my craft. I don't do it to lord it over anyone or high priestess respect me. For me, I'm a witch first. And Sekhmet and I've had that conversation. She understands she's not getting offerings every day. I'm not a priest, I'm a witch. But for me, I couldn't practice magic without the Egyptian deity, without that connection to that concept of her, or Tahuti or Horu, whoever it is I'm working with. So they are very integral in my practice. And everything I do kind of revolves around them. I hope that answered it.
Yeah, no, definitely. I mean, I think there's a lot of good information there. So, okay, so let's say this. Let's say you're out in public. Let's say you're at the mall or a festival or a movie theater or the grocery store. As a Kemetic witch, are there any specific symbols in the community that you might see to identify another Kemetic witch?
It's not like with the pentacle. You see someone wearing a pentacle and you're like, witch. Because a lot of the images that are very famous in Egyptian mythology, like the Eye of Horus or the Ankh, have been appropriated by other magical traditions and people, which is fine, I guess, to a certain degree. But anybody can wear an Ankh and be like, oh, I'm a vampire, so I use the Ankh as a symbol of immortality. You were like serious, like it's a little hard to say, but I would say like the Ankh and the Eye of Horus would be really great symbols to identify somebody with. But it's like 90% miss, 10% hit because we are so rare ourselves.
Mm-hmm. So I think we pretty much covered the symbology of the Ankh within that, but how would you describe to someone who might not know, how would you describe to someone the meaning behind the Eye of Horus?
Well, that's very complicated. Because the Eye of Horus, the story of the Eye of Horus is Set kills Osiris, who's Horus's dad, wants revenge, so he goes after his uncle, and I believe it was his uncle, pecks his eye out. So Tahuti, who's the god of magic, he comes waltzing in and fixes Horus's eye through magic. So the symbology of the Eye of Horus is not only his whole right eye, which is the sun and protection, but his damaged left eye, which heals and waxes and wanes, and that's the moon. But an Eye of Horus can also be an offering of incense or bread. It can be a person. It can be a flower or a gift. Anything can be the Eye of Horus. But that should not be confused with the Eye of Ra. The Eye of Ra is a goddess. She's either Sekhmet or Tefnut or Boss, depending on who you ask about which creation. But that's a goddess in my mind. It's not a something. The Eye of Horus it's hard to identify.
Okay, so it has nothing to do then with the evil eye.
Right, nothing. So don't ever, if you guys see, like, the evil eye isn't even the Eye of Horus. It looks nothing like it.
Right.
The evil eye in a circle with another circle in the middle of it. Okay,
yes.
Don't ever think that if you see an Ankh or the Eye of Horus that it's the evil eye. Protection.
Yes.
To me.
And I've heard that actually a lot where I've been in a metaphysical shop or something, and I'll hear, matter of fact, not that long ago, I heard two younger girls. They looked like they were about 15, 16 years old. And they were in this metaphysical shop that I was also in. I was checking out, and there's a jewelry rack kind of over here behind me. And I heard one of the girls like kind of pick it up and look at the price of it and everything. And she was like, oh my gosh, $16. And the other girl was like, for an Eye of Horus? And I just kind of chuckled because I was like, I don't think you know what you're talking about at all.
Yeah.
So,
no,
okay.
No, it's not.
So how would you describe the Kemetic community in general for someone who, might just be kind of starting this path and getting into this? What should they kind of look for in the community? What should they watch out for? What should they kind of expect to find? Overall, how would you say the community is online and offline?
Well, it depends on how you approach it. Now, if you are a Black person, you have many more options available to you as a Kemetic practitioner, because there are groups specifically dedicated to Black-only members, and they are the hardcore Afrocentric Kemetic. Those are pretty far and in between nowadays. Those groups have kind of died out. You also have the, people who accept the white groups, which is our group, Kemetic Reform, and we're a little bit more updated and modern, a little bit more loose. But then you also have House of Nature. So that's a very large online community. I had a very negative experience being on there. So it's not something that I usually recommend outside of take their beginner's course, but don't take it as a newbie who's already learned a little history of the Egyptian religion, because their religion itself is very centered on a king. And like I said, I just had a really bad experience with it, so it's not something I recommend. But most of us were very solitary. We're very fragmented. We're not really a community as of yet. And that could be because we are still kind of a newer group that has broke off from the Western occult traditions of like Wicca and stuff like that. I don't know if that's a reason for it, or if there's just fewer people being called to the Egyptian religion.
Or do you think maybe it's even just the nature of the people in the group to be a little bit more on the solitary side instead of the community aspect?
Yeah, it very well could be. I know that we have a lot of fun doing our online rituals, but I know a lot of us enjoy our alone time as well, because the Egyptian religion itself is very UPG based. We have great amount of history, but it's very fragmentary. So we do have to take everything we practice with a little grain of salt and personalize it and fill in the blanks ourselves with whatever works for us. It's just very fragmentary. So I can see it being very personal to a lot of people, and we just being solitary people.
Mm-hmm.
That very well.
So this is kind of a side question, but I'd be interested to know too. Do you know how other Afro-centered religions with the Egyptians kind of would have gotten along? Like in ancient days, how did that all pan out? Because there's the Sahara Desert that kind of has them separated, but there was still trade and things like that still going on.
Well, the Egyptians recognized that there were different people of different skin tones. You can see that. You see the Kush drawings, people of Kush, very dark. You see the Egyptians more of a reddish brown kind of color, a little bit lighter skin. And then you see the Libyans being very light skinned, almost Greek white, and then so you definitely see those. But to the Egyptians, if you practice truth, order, and the Egyptian way of life, and gods, go to temple, make your offerings, make your sacrifices, and have babies, you're a fucking Egyptian. Islam really didn't have a place in Egypt in that sense. There was a time that Kush in the 18th dynasty, maybe 25th dynasty, they ruled as the Black Pharaohs, and they're even called the Black Pharaohs of Egypt. And Kush rose up, conquered, Egypt for a little bit, and that didn't really pan out for too long, and they got kicked out. So I don't think that modern day Kemetics would get along too well. Afrocentric groups would get along too well. I've noticed that a lot of Afrocentric groups are focused on other forms of spirituality and not just Egyptian forms of spirituality, which is fine. I practice voodoo itself. I don't think that they would be okay with it, the Egyptians themselves. I think that the religion has had to evolve, because you're not going to find anybody who's purely devoted to the Egyptian way of life as was practiced 5,000 years ago. Everything's fragmentary, and they got to take where they can get it.
Yeah, I guess that was kind of what I was wondering, is how would, the Haitian Voodoo priest get along with the Egyptian Kemetic witch, I guess we'll say. I don't know if that's really correct or not, but like just seeing that interaction between these two different African spiritualities, I think would be very interesting, don't you?
Well, it would be, because like if they're modern people, they might be able to sit down and learn from each other. But if you're talking about plucking somebody out of history, oh, it's a war. You know,
You
got
think
two
so?
people
Because
that
that's what I'm talking about. I'm talking
yeah.
about, I'm
They're
not
not
talking
going to
about
speak
modern
the same
people.
language, right? They're not going to. Yeah, they're not going to understand each other, and they're just going to fight. In my opinion, I think it would be. Egyptians have a very totalitarian conquer kind of mindset.
Yes, yes.
And they learned it. They took
Yes,
a
that's
lot
what I
of
was going to
land from a
say.
lot of people.
Yes, because I feel like the Egyptians were so powerful and so advanced. And so I just think it would be interesting to see kind of that interaction, because the Egyptians were very ahead of their time, technologically speaking, as also astrologically speaking. I mean, they were amazing. Mathematicians, I think, too. I mean, just multiple things that they just already had down pat, and very intelligent, you know, for what we would think of as ancient people. You know, I think a lot of people, not saying I think this, but I think kind of the modern man, we'll just say, kind of views ancient people as unintelligible.
Yes,
I really disagree with that when it comes to the Egyptians. I think that they actually were very intelligent. I mean, we still can't figure out, and this could be a whole other topic, because I actually don't know how you feel about this, but we still can't figure out how some of their pyramids were built, right? And we have all these conspiracy theories around that. So that would be an interesting video to do with you too, just talking about that, since you are a Kemetic witch. Because I'm sure you probably have some form of opinion around that.
Yeah, I'd be very interested in that. Because you get a lot of alien theories and Atlantis and, you know, things like that. And I got a lot of things I'd like to respond with that, you know?
Yeah. But, yes.
They were fascinating people. That's why we have as much as we have today. Because the Greeks came in and were like, what the fuck is this? This is awesome. Write this shit down, Socrates, you know?
Right.
It really was fascinating even to them at that point in time. So we're very lucky that there are so many people interested in preserving this culture, and that we have as many interpretations as we have to go off of. Because Egyptologists, you know, they disagree about certain things. In here, you have Faulkner, who says one of the 42 declarations is don't be a homosexual. But he's one of 4 who the other 3 say no, that's not what it says. That's not what it says. So the key is finding, you know, kind of your voice in the way that you like your flavor Egyptian religion, and try to apply it to your path.
Yeah, and that brings me to another thing I was thinking of. I remember, I think I was watching a Netflix documentary. It wasn't the alien one. It wasn't the Egyptian alien one, but it was another Egyptian documentary. And they were kind of comparing, and I'll see if I can go on Netflix after we are done with this and see what it's called. And I'll try to put a link to that down below too, because it was a pretty good documentary. I'm not extremely knowledgeable when it comes to Kemeticism, but when it comes to history, I know a little bit. I'm not going to say I'm by any means an expert. But they kind of made the comparison that, you know, if the ancient Egyptians were here today, right, that they would be perceived as more conservative, actually. And I was kind of surprised. Not that I'm trying to take this into a political sense, because it doesn't need to be. But I guess just in regards to me being a modern woman looking back on an ancient people, and just kind of seeing how they lived their lives and what they did and how they dressed with all the ornamental jewelry and, you know, very extravagant. I guess I was just kind of surprised to hear that they would have been so conservative.
Well, I personally don't think it's fair to the ancients to put our filter on their culture. You have to kind of go into it with an objective view. So what we would view as conservative today would be conservative dress, right? Egyptians ran around naked. It was fucking hot in the desert. That's not conservative by today's standards.
Sure, no kidding.
Yeah. Egyptians love to party, anything for a fucking party, you know, because the afterlife, what we have a lot of left over is our grave goods. We don't have a lot of modern goods because everything was broken down and recycled, which we would view as very liberal. So I dare to put that kind of view on them because I don't see them as either liberal or conservative. They had slaves, that's very conservative mindset. Women could testify in court though, that's very liberal. Women could own lands, that's liberal. Women could be kings, you know, that's very liberal. But it was very patriarchal too. It was very man's world. Any wives as he wanted, not the women, you know, we didn't get to go around fucking whoever we wanted. But they also didn't have things like marriage. It was about living as a people and not liberal. It was about what worked and what, but they did believe in working for your wages, taking care of their elderly even after they died. So I don't think that's very fair to label them either or.
Wow. Yeah. No, that sounds like a lot of valid points. And that was actually leading me to one of my other questions was, how do you feel? And I guess you kind of answered it there, but so women in ancient Egypt were kind of ahead of their time in some ways, but also not in others, is kind of what I'm getting.
Definitely, you know, women were very prominent because, okay, take the goddess Isis, okay? She is the mother of the king Horus. Through her is the seat of the throne, okay? Because the mother births the son. So women are highly regarded in ancient Egypt as the vessel that brings in life. Isis's crown is, before she merged with Hathor, before she took on the horn crown, was a literal throne, a seat. And her name literally means throne, seat of the king. So women were very advanced for other societies at that time, or with that same level of technology, very high standing. But a woman's place was at home and to raise babies and to take care of the home. A very famous scribe, man wishes to have peace in his home. Don't tell your wife how to run her home. You accept it. That's her domain. She doesn't tell you how to go out and plow fields or build pyramids. You don't tell her how to keep the house. So there are very liberal views with women in the ancient world. You could testify in court. Your word is as good as a man's, because if you saw it and he saw it and she saw it, motherfucker's gonna hang, you know? So women definitely had a voice in ancient Egypt. It wasn't very loud, but it was there.
Okay. Yeah, I think that's interesting how it's kind of almost both.
Yeah, it's a little oppressive by today's standards, definitely, but it's because women were sold as property and to make alliances, you know, through the marriage bed. But it was still not as bad as some other societies where there was rape and things like that. So it was good to know.
Yeah, I mean, it sounds like to me for that time they had more rights than a lot of other ancient women in other cultures.
I would definitely agree with that.
So I think it's important to kind of think about, you know, and I agree with you. I think we can't view ancient people and ancient cultures through the same lens we view our culture now. And I even agree with that even for modern day cultures. Like a lot of Americans look at other cultures like or in Asia, and they, like, for instance, Americans all the time, and this is a little controversial, Americans all the time question how you could even eat, you know, what they consider a pet, right? But like in their culture, they don't see it that way. So I agree with you. I think that, you know, it's important to kind of take your own lens of your own culture off before you examine another. So moving on though, because this is one of my favorite questions actually, and I'm excited to hear about it. So, okay, I follow the Celtic Wheel of the Year. I'm very eclectic, and I love holidays. I guess you could say kind of like the Egyptians, I love to party, right? So any reason to like decorate and like bake a bunch of food and have a bunch of friends over and drink and celebrate and honor the sacredness of life, I'm totally down. So are there any specific like holy days or sacred days? Kind of like within the Celtic Wheel of the Year, there's like Samhain, for instance, or Yule, and if there are, how do you kind of celebrate that? I know that's a big question.
Yeah, no, it's okay. Definitely Egyptians were party people, anything to celebrate. And just about every day, I do have a copy of the Cairo calendar. If anybody's interested in that, it's this huge, huge long list of party days. Now, we have personally cut it down to like, I think maybe 12 to 15 holidays. And then each individual member, we also celebrate our own holidays. But some of the ones we celebrate together are, I guess, the 5 days upon the year. And that is when the 5 gods, like Horus, Isis, when they have their birthdays. So there's that. Then they also have like the overthrowing of Pep, and that's where we burn snake figures with evil that we want to be rid of. And we pray to Sekhmet to preserve us from her 7 arrows of the year. It's just all kinds of holidays. One that I personally celebrate instead of Christmas is the raising of the willow, and that is linked with Osiris and protection. So I make protection amulets on Yule, and give them to my friends and family because it's kind of Christmas present, but it's also linked with protection, which the story is linked with, because the willow protected Osiris's body when he was in the Nile. So how I celebrate those? Okay, so the Egyptians, they marked their calendar by the rising of Sekhmet. And Sekhmet is the star Sirius in the Greek world. And it always rises at the heel of Osiris, the constellation of Osiris, which is Orion in the Greek Pantheon. So when Sekhmet rises, you have the floods. And with the floods comes the fertile black silt of the Nile, and once the floods recede, you can start your planting. So the star rises sometime back in ancient time around July 18th. So that's about when we start, and we have the 5 days upon the year, and we overthrow the evil one. I have a couple of videos up of those if you guys want to go check them out on my witchcraft, Kemetic witchcraft channel. We have those, but then we also have the sailing of Hathor, and where we honor the Great Mother, and it's all kinds of crazy stuff. There's individual ones. People may honor Amun on certain days. Other Kemetics may honor, like I honored Sekhmet. Other ones may turn to only Anapu and only worship Anapu and celebrate his days. So it depends on the Kemetic, really, and what they feel comfortable with. It's very, like I said, it's very fragmentary.
Okay. So do you kind of have maybe an idea? Because I think, especially in a lot of European pagans, in comparison to, Hindus or Egyptian Kemeticism, do you feel like there is any particular special or sacred meaning behind the gods not only being personified, but also Anthropomorphized? Big word.
Well, it was stuff that was familiar to them. So if you go back far enough, the earliest gods are Set and Horus. The falcon god and the Set, whatever his animal is, the Setian animal is what they call him. So those were things that were known to the Egyptians. You also have the lions of the plain, so they're really strong and hard to kill. So that's got to be a god too, right? Then you have the hippopotamus, and the river god. Well, that's Happy because they're associated with the river. So it's just their way that they understood the workings of their land. It's a lot like the Native Americans. It's how they explain their world, how they saw things. Now, some people say that it was very nature-based, and it was, but it was very civilization-based too. It was very integral to the way they ran their country, and their land and their offices. So it's hard to say. It's just the way that they interpreted. These are animals they saw. These are things that they valued. This is how that they grew up. So this is how they saw their gods.
Yeah, well, and I kind of see, like, of course, there's also European personified anthropomorphic deity as well, but I don't feel like really to the same extent as other other places. Like, for instance, Seronos, however you want to say his name, he is also kind of an anthropomorphic god, but not like all the way, right? Like, I feel like there's a lot of the Egyptian deities who are just like an anthropomorphized human, like a lion walking on two legs, like, essentially, whereas Kurunos basically kind of just has antlers.
Right.
Or in Hinduism, where you have Ganesh, who isn't like an elephant, basically.
Yeah. Well, see, for the Egyptians, everything's the gods. Everything's linked to the gods. So Ra had 70 manifestations. 70. Some of them were animal-headed, some of them weren't. Some of them were people, just like, regular people. But a lot of stuff that the Egyptians did was anthropomorphized. Just because that was what that was their world. That's just what they knew. So maybe they just happened to like animals more. Maybe they knew their world depended on the flourishing of animals. I don't know. There's a lot of speculation there. But there certainly was a lot of symbolism that they adapted into their culture and their writing that was reflected through the gods.
Mm-hmm. So in Kemeticism, would you say that, like, the gods are all separate in the sense that, like for instance, in Hinduism, they're all pretty much part of one, but they're all different manifestations of the same, but they're all also different with their own attributes and personalities, but they all link back to source. They all go back, basically. So now also, though, in like the Greek pantheon, we don't experience that. Like, Zeus and Hera are two completely different entities. They are not part of the same source, so to speak. So when it comes to Kemeticism, are the gods separate individual entities who were kind of, I don't want to say created, but they manifested, or are they all part of one kind of divine source?
Well, that's a very difficult question to answer because you see both reflected in history. And depending on who you ask in today, if you ask House of Neter says, of course they're all one deity. Ra had 70 manifestations of Khepri and Atum, but he's still Ra, so of course it's just one deity. And if you go back in time, you have the monotheistic deity of the Aten, who was started by Akhenaten. And he said that there is only the sun disk, the Aten, and I am in High Priest. And Nefertiti, my queen, she is that we have. And he is the only deity. Any other deity you pray to is just a manifestation of the Aten. But you go back further than that, and you start to see Sekhmet Bast joined together. So Sekhmet is the Eye of Ra, well, so is Bast. Sekhmet slaughtered mankind, well, so did Bast. Sekhmet had a lion head, well, so did Bast at one point. So I don't think that they started out as the same deity. I think they very much were separate deities. It's just that different tribes throughout the years have mingled and merged and created the great land of Egypt. And it just kind of became other deities. Other deities became linked with other ones. And that may have been to prevent those deities dying out during wartime. If you are in a tribe and I'm in a tribe and we go to war and you win, you tell me about your deity, Tahuti, and I'm like, oh, you know what? Tahuti sounds like the deity that I have. And I start linking my deity with your deity, that keeps my deity alive. It keeps that deity from being obliterated. And I keep my children. So eventually, deities all become linked. So me, myself, I am atheist. So I sort of see them as all the same source, which is myself. Do see them working together. But Tut, who is the founder of our temple, she is hard polytheist, and she says they are all separate deities. And when you see something like Sekhmet Bast, who are linked, or Sekhmet Bast Mut, who are linked, they're working together on a level we don't understand.
Okay.
So it depends on who you ask. I've noticed that most Egyptian pagans tend to lean towards pantheist or soft polytheism. Hard polytheism is kind of a little rarer to see. Egyptian pagans are Kemetic witches. They're Cameron pagans who follow the soft polytheism of Wicca.
Okay, wow, yeah, that's a lot of good information there.
Yeah, it's complicated.
Yeah, but it's all very intriguing, and I'm sure, for the viewers and for the people who might watch this video who are looking for this information, this is really good information to have. Because one of the reasons why that really got me into wanting to do this is because, like, I've been on YouTube for, I think, a year, maybe a little bit longer, and I see a lot of kind of the same information just done by 20 different YouTubers. A lot of the same thing just kind of gets regurgitated. And it's really cool seeing how people of like minds do kind of the same thing in different ways. And I appreciate that. Mm-hmm. But I feel like there's not a lot of, how do I want to say this? I feel like there is not a lot of education across the board for all different pagan traditions, whereas I see a lot of videos, and it might just be because I'm eclectic. So this is what is being suggested to me through YouTube, through videos I've watched, but it seems like I see a lot of videos on eclectic Wicca as far as paganism goes. Some on Gardnerian, but when it comes to any of the other branches of paganism, there's very limited information out there. Would you agree with that? Or is that kind of maybe just my own experience?
No, I agree. One of the things about me coming out on YouTube was me putting my voice out there that, hey, it's not all love, light, and unicorn shit of eclectic paganism. Not everybody follows the threefold law. Not everyone knows where that comes from, even if they claim to follow it. So I came out to kind of opinion, and whether people like it or not, that's not the point. It's my opinion. You can agree or disagree, and I'd love to debate you either way. But for me, it is a lot of 101. It's a lot of, okay, this is how you cast a circle. Okay, this is how you call the elements. Okay, this is the elemental sigils, and it's not a lot of blended videos. And this is actually something I've talked about with my friend Robert, who is a Wab priest, who's very knowledgeable in the Egyptian pantheon, in the Egyptian tradition. He kind of inspires me to do better too, so it's really cool. But I was telling him that I wanted to start doing videos more centered on the synchronized religion practice of Egyptian hoodoo, you know, how I would set up a ritual, how I open a circle. It's not really a circle, it's a ceremony. It's an offering to the gods and tell them, hey, I remember you, I honor you, here's this offering, and then I do my spell or ritual, whatever I'm doing, and I incorporate that, and how I incorporate that into my practice. Because I don't see a lot of videos centered on incorporating anything into a practice. I see, okay, and I do it myself, I'm guilty of this. Okay, take the candles and put them this way. Okay, light the candles, say whatever you want, or here's a little chant. You know, I don't actually throw the whole thing together. So I've been talking with Robert about actually doing that a bit more, just so it's a clearer view on what I believe and how I practice. So look for that for future videos for me.
Awesome. Yeah, that sounds good. That sounds good. And I think we've kind of actually surprisingly gotten through a lot of my original questions, I guess, to kind of end it, which we are going to open up all of this to questions from anyone who's viewing this live. So if you do have any questions for Zebora, feel free to write those down below. And while those questions are coming in, if there are questions that come in, what would you say to someone who is looking to kind of start down this path? What advice would you have for them?
Well, like I said earlier, it's very complicated and very conflicting information because what we have is fragmentary and everybody has their own opinion on how the other person lives through whatever lenses that they have. So take it slow. There's going to be a lot of shit coming at you you're not going to understand right away, and that's okay. When I first came in, I looked at the 42 declarations of innocence. I'm like, what the hell is that? I got to learn that. Now I incorporate it into my daily life. So take it slow. You know, it's okay to be new. Ask questions. Be open and watch documentaries. Form your own opinion about these people from the source. You know, don't go through a third party like a pope or something like that. Take your own time. Pick up a copy of the Book of the Dead. I have mine right here. Where is it? I don't have mine right here. It's up there. Haha! But pick up a copy of the Book of the Dead. Well, you know, and just check out the religion for yourself and form your own opinions about it, because ultimately this religion is UPG. It's unverified personal gnosis. It's about how you feel and how you practice. It's not about anybody else. It's about your relationship with the God. So take it slow, ask questions, and don't be intimidated.
Wow. Well, this has been awesome. It's been really, really fun hearing more about Kemeticism and your beliefs and what you subscribe to. And I just love it. I just love it. I think it's been fun. And
I love being here. Great.
And we'll definitely have to, I mean, I want you back on my channel anyway, of course.
Oh, of course. Of course.
And maybe we'll talk after the show about maybe doing an episode on, I don't know what we should call it, Kemeticism, Kemetic conspiracy. I don't know what we should call it. We can talk about that off air. But I think hearing from a Kemetic witch about the conspiracies of Egypt would be so fun. So fun. So let's look at the chat here. I don't see really any questions or anything from viewers. So I think that's pretty much going to be it. Guys, I did link her channel down in the description. It's Kemetic Witchcraft, Zabora, Kemetic Witchcraft. The link is actually in the description, so you can just click on that, and don't forget to subscribe to her so that way you can, you know, see all of her content. She's got a great channel. One of my personal favorites on her channel to watch is her bone vlog series. It's very interesting, so definitely check that out. And yeah, scroll back to when she originally started posting, because when we were talking earlier about her experience with Sekhmet, it's a very moving, powerful video that you can't help but to also feel what she was feeling. So I hope all of you guys have, you know, an amazing night, evening, day, wherever it is where you're at. And, you know, I appreciate everyone for hanging out and watching with us.
Kemeti.
Bye.